What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk to you about SoundHound. I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So SoundHound and the broader market did have a pretty kick-ass Friday. Regrettably though, it did bounce off of a very key resistance level. So that's kind of what attributed to this. But this upcoming week is going to be a wild week because you have a lot of big companies unveiling their earnings, including yours truly, and also a lot of big data points. So starting off, we have ISM services on Monday. You have the exports imports. I think that might be a touchy subject given the circumstances of what Trump has been really focusing on over the last little bit. So that's coming out on Tuesday. Then you have the dreaded interest rate decision. I think it is fair to assume that there will not be any cut, as you can kind of see right here, but what Powell says afterwards will really again shake things up, because most likely there won't be any cut or anything, but that might trigger obviously Trump again to really go on his power trip to try to fire Powell. And honestly, I completely agree with Powell, the fact that given the data points, it's still premature to start cutting their rates. Like, I don't know, it is what it is. We'll just have to kind of wait and see how that plays out. But nonetheless, that could cause a lot of uncertainty, and the market doesn't like that all that much. Thursday, you have the typical stuff, so initial jobless claims and so forth. And then Friday, you have a rush, a huge amount of Fed speakers. So that could cause some volatility. A lot of big names as well this week. So you have Palantir, him and her. So a lot of speculative kind of growth stocks. Celsius, then you do have yours truly, Thursday after hours, SoundHound. It is sad to see that I guess the popularity of it has dropped. Obviously over the last little bit it was like number 1 or 2, but nonetheless though, when it comes down to SoundHound's upcoming earnings, you have 30.38 million for the revenue estimate, which does represent a 161.99% year-over-year growth. Analysts, based on 7 analysts, are assuming anywhere from 30.03 to 31.1 million for revenue. So again, that's kind of the parameters. Fairly tight if you ask me. Aside from that, earnings per share -9 cents, and that does still represent 27.78% year-over-year growth. -10 the low, -8 the high. Similarly, very tight stuff. One big concern from the last earnings was just growth, partnerships, and SoundHound will be able to at least talk quite a lot on that extensively. So they did have that recent kind of partnership for that utility kind of talking conversational kind of thing. Then you did have Tencent. That's going to be pretty much the big deal for SoundHound's upcoming earnings. And so analysts most likely will want to know, what does SoundHound estimate that is going to result in revenue? So that's going to be something that SoundHound has to really at least give good numbers on. If they're very gray and just like, I don't know, we'll just have to wait and see, the market definitely will not like that. Historically speaking, you can kind of see that they are about a 50-50% likelihood of beating versus kind of misses from their earnings. This upcoming earnings though, there is a 13.58% implied move, meaning $1.27 in either direction is somewhat possible. But one thing to take note of though is historically their Q1 earnings, they do typically beat. So if we look back at 2024 and 2023, it's ultimately seen as somewhat positive. So last earnings in 2024 during the same time frame, it did go up 7.1%, and ultimately 2 weeks after landed roughly 5% in the green. So pretty good stuff. We'll have to wait and see what they do come with for their key metrics as well as future guidance. I think we did see a lot of companies recently, such as Apple and a couple others, really flop on their actual future guidance, but give good key metrics data, but they still do go down. So I think right now the market is very focused on future guidance. So again, SoundHound will really have to hit that out of the park in order for it to be seen as relatively optimistic and bullish. But Over the last week, though, SoundHound did go down 0.95%. So rather kind of frustrating to see it is failing to really break out. So most likely it is waiting for this upcoming week's earnings to be that catalyst. I'm going to go over technicals and stuff in a second, but as far as going into this upcoming week, 32.85% of the free float is being shorted. Works out to be 119.34 million shares. I know I mentioned it on my last video, but in case you missed it, I am going to be live streaming the SoundHound earnings. So it is after hours again on the Thursday. So definitely subscribe and do all that fun jazz. But this is what we're going into this upcoming week with. In the past, SoundHound, the day of their earnings, shorts get very, very active. So anticipate that to obviously happen this time around. Logically, I would say that it can't go higher than 34%. That seems to be kind of the peak, and above that gets like puts SoundHound more so in like a value kind of aspect. But yeah, I feel like shorts, their cap will be roughly like 34%. That's kind of how high I see it potentially going to. But what do I know? When it comes down to last week, with it closing at 939, that does mean that the 950 and above strike prices all expired worthless. So that's kind of the downside of doing options. So you had 2,000 at that 9, 1,000 at 850, and then 1,000 at 8. So you won't see any bump up come Monday as market makers cover that, because that's kind of chump change in reality. Even looking forward into this upcoming week, no real crazy just walls for the open interest, but based on the volume that was done on Friday, you see a consensus for it to be roughly around that $12 range, and then the bears for it to be sub 8. So I think individuals and entities are assuming that it is going to be more volatile than the implied move. So again, the implied move is kind of estimating like $1 in either direction. So based on the options, they're anticipating more volatility than that. So should be a fun time for day traders, swing traders, and everyone else. But with it at 939, it is trading between this R1 and the pivot. So 859 is going to be a strong support. Flip side, 991 is going to be the next strong target / resistance. And we do know based on Friday, and I think a couple of times as well last week, it did bounce off that general area. So we know that's kind of a strong one to kind of keep in mind. But aside from that, we should get some new ratings as well. So analysts are still somewhat wishy-washy on SoundHound. Of the ones that have given ratings, you see some pretty bullish ones. So as a consensus going into this upcoming week, 1490 is that price target, representing a 58.68% upside. But nonetheless, though, hopefully we do have some new ones. Most likely Daniel Ives is waiting on the sidelines for their earnings, and we'll give maybe a re-rating. Hopefully around that $20 range still would be ideal, but anything is possible. Even if I feel like $12 to $18 ratings, if they come out within that range, would still be seen as extremely bullish given where SoundHound is at. So long story short, just anticipate a lot of analyst ratings. So that'll affect next Friday. But going into this upcoming week with it at 949, that's including the after hours activity, it is right now above that 50-day moving average and also 200. So $9.10, and then 903 is going to be those very strong support points. So that's that 50 and 100. Flip side, you have 1258, and based on the bulls, that's where ultimately they are anticipating for it to land for this upcoming week. So you see a little bit more upside than down based on where SoundHound is at. And I think one big thing that could also move the market this week is tariffs. So there's a little bit more of an understanding that there's some progress between China and the States. I know I've stated that in the past. I'm not going to say it's going to come this week, but honestly, I think that could be a very good catalyst. Just when it comes, nobody really knows, but I think there's a good understanding that at least there's some stuff happening behind the scenes. Super trend. So right now that is sitting at 1004. Kind of bounced off of that a couple times over the last week and a half. And so that does control the algorithmic trading. So algorithmic trading is extremely powerful. So for whatever reason, if SoundHound is able to get above that, then you'll have kind of a nice glide up as what we've seen in the past. So whenever it does break above that, that does signal a very nice kind of upward trend. So I think all in all, SoundHound does have a very good opportunity to really hit a home run earnings. But I feel, as I've mentioned in previous videos, more constructive criticism, they need to really portray themselves as a all-in-one type of solution, not just for restaurants, not just for auto, but everyone. And they need to also just branch away and not really focus on, hey, we're doing like conversational, like utility type of companies. They need to really branch out and say, hey, we are here for everyone, including, let's say, SoFi or whatever else, as I brought up in the past. So they need to really sell themselves a little bit better than what they have. I cover also Resolve AI. They're very good at selling themselves, and I think the market is giving them a better multiple than SoundHound in some cases. But again, I think there's just a lot of opportunity for SoundHound to really hit a home run earnings and really push it to at least that $12 to $14 range in the short term. But again, it's going to come down to the numbers, right? So yeah, let me know your general thoughts on SoundHound. Throw your price predictions in the comments below. Do you feel it's going to go a little bit lower? Do you think it's going to go higher? What's your general thoughts on SoundHound? Hopefully everyone's having a kick-ass weekend. One final thing though, if you're looking for some good buy signals, pop over to my Patreon. I put out buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which are on point. So definitely worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. With all that, appreciate all of you watching.